I'm going to focus the topic on the Jesus Christ from Buddhist perspective. Of course, it is very presumptuous to think like that because Buddha predates Jesus Christ, so Buddha doesn't have any particular attitude towards Christ or Christians, but Buddha had very universally binding attitude towards all sentient beings, from the ordinary to the realized ones. From the Buddhist perspective, all sentient beings have Buddha nature, let alone someone like Jesus Christ, who has been amazing inspiration from many millions of people, not only in his days, but even today in the world. The largest number of world population are still followers of Christianity and its Christian values. And all those Christian values and virtues are totally incongruent with teachings of the Buddha. And so I'm going to today focus on how we as a Buddhist should view the Jesus Christ's teaching and his life, his work, and fellow human beings who follow Christianity, and how we should regard them and learn to live in mutual respect and learn from each other. Because Jesus Christ, if you see in the Christian kind of idea, he's the son of the God. In Buddhism, we will see the Buddha as the manifestation of the enlightened ones. So basically, saying the same thing. Whether the source of manifestation is God or the enlightened ones, the main thing is what, in fact, these figures like Jesus Christ or Buddha have to the world. There are no argument that these both are great religious figures, spiritual inspirations to the world. Definitely, the little I know of the Jesus Christ life indicates that he definitely lived by the 7 virtues of Christianity. And by the way, if you look at the 7 virtues of Christianity or teachings of the Christ, 7 virtues are basically opposite of 7 sins, So firstly, the idea of the sins being original is probably a doctrinally very weak point, because if the sins are very originally there or like permanent, then you can't teach even virtue. So it's obviously not does not agree that the sins are original and could not be changed. If the sins are misdeeds of the individuals cannot be changed, then what's the point of teaching the virtues? So definitely there is some kind of contradiction with the whole idea of sins being original, and yet we are promoted to practice virtue. In Buddhism, in Buddhism, which predates at least five centuries before Christ, and there's even the belief that people think that Jesus Christ actually traveled and went to India and studied Buddhism. There's every possibility of that. Some people believe he went to Tibet, but at that time there was no Buddhism in Tibet, so he would have learned Bon. So that's highly unlikely. But if he did go to India, that would have been like a very prime time when Buddhism was very widespread. It spread as far as the east, borders of Greek and Persia and Turkey and all the Central Asian republics. They were all practicing Buddhism. So Buddhism was a very strongest time. So the very idea of the practicing virtue, some of the very central Christian teachings have every reason for the Buddhists to believe that Jesus was like a bodhisattva. Jesus was doing no less than the work and teachings of the bodhisattva. Not only he was teaching, but he lived. Even those people who hanged him, crucified him, he forgave them. So that's one of the many virtues, is not resorting to hatred, but practicing of patience. So from the Buddhist perspective, Jesus Christ should we should have, particularly from Mahayana Buddhist point of view, there's no doubt of considering Jesus as bodhisattva, because bodhisattva is the enlightened one, but who has deliberately come to help the world. So basically, Jesus Christ, the Son of the God, has come to save the world. And that's exactly what the bodhisattvas are considered. Bodhisattvas take the form of nirmanakaya, or conventional body, and come to the world and then teach the way of peace and tolerance and kindness. So there's no difficulty. Every time you look at the life of Jesus Christ, you can see he's a bodhisattva. Bodhisattva is one who completely serves others. So the whole idea of Jesus Christ being the shepherd, and all the sentient beings being the flocks, or the flocks of sentient beings, is very, very much like in Mahayana Buddhism, we talk about the shepherd like bodhicitta, and king like bodhicitta, and boatman like bodhicitta. So shepherd like bodhicitta is exactly what Jesus Christ is depicted as. He was a savior. He was saving people, not necessarily by him, but teaching people the way how to save themselves from their deadly sins, and by picking up the practice of the 7 virtues. So from the Mahayanist point of view, even if people do not regard Jesus as a bodhisattva, but there's no danger of regarding bodhisattva Jesus as someone who has a Buddha nature, and whose Buddha nature is nurtured, and therefore someone who is well ahead on the path, becoming a great guide and savior to many people. So that's why it's very important. So if you look at the 7 virtues of Krishna, 7 virtues, they're largely physical. They're largely physical ethics. There's hardly anything. All of them are largely physical Christian ethics, which are largely also in agreement with Buddhist ethics as well. So when you look at the 7 virtues, such as first is chastity. The chastity is a physical vow of sense control of one's own desire and lust, and try to contain them. If possible, lead a practice of what we call the celibacy. Now, celibacy is a big problem, and most religious traditions who promote celibacy, with the exception of those who don't, they all idealize the virtue of celibacy, but those who actually are able to live celibate are very, very few indeed, very, very few indeed. And nevertheless, people pretentiously act as though they are, and then judge each other thinking they are not, others are not. As a result of that, this virtue of chastity or celibacy has caused more problem than it has solved. So that's why how virtuous that virtue is in today's world is a big question. So where there is no emphasis of rigid chastity, but actual ethics of not hurting others through one's misuse of physical behavior, sexual behavior, is of course in agreement with the social norms and the ways of society. So from that point, and generically speaking, the virtue of chastity, a virtue of maintaining a kind of respectable physical conduct in relation to not abusing, harming others, is a very much in the spirit of Buddhist teaching. So there is no disagreement from Buddhist perspective. Buddhist perspective also says, do not harm other sentient beings, be that physically or verbally or or mentally. So therefore, the first virtue of seven virtue is chastity. In Buddhist tradition, there is a great attempt and emphasis also by the monastics to practice live a very chaste life. And those who do live a chaste life are considered to be much purer or holy or more worthy of veneration and respect, what they call people in robes, Whether robes makes person chaste or not is another thing. But definitely people who have a certain self-control by virtue which they do not cause any harm and abuse to others through minding their chastefulness or way of life is definitely a acceptable and respectable Buddhist perspective as well. But having said that, even in Buddhism, where the monastic population is relatively bigger than other religious tradition, it is still not even 4 to 5% among the Buddhists who are actually becoming a monastic. Even those who are becoming monastic and living have a vow of chastity or giving up sex altogether. This is a very small percentage. And some Buddhist countries they have temporary monastic vows, of which the chastity is one of them. And they do so only for a couple of weeks. After that, they have no intention or ability to do that. So that first virtue is probably most cultures are failing, and maybe that is a little bit, I would say, a little bit idealistic virtue. This doesn't mean the society doesn't have any particular norms and expectation how one should behave towards each other. Whether it has to be based on celibacy or not is another thing. So there's no real disagreement with that. The second virtue is temperance. Temperance is a form of kind of moderation in what one eats, and particularly with the drinks. And definitely, this virtue of temperance is not highly observed by the Christian world. A Buddhist world also, not drinking alcohol and moderation of food is a very important virtue. And quite a lot of the modern first world people's suffering is overeating. Suffering comes from overeating. And so people want health, but their health is impeded by their lack of temperance. So the virtue of temperance is a very much and the vow of poverty or people living on alms is a very much a shared kind of virtue in all the monastics or the hermits and mendicants in any spiritual tradition. They all have practiced that. In Buddhism, not only is people must give up alcohol and various other narcotic substances, but also they must not eat immorally. And so the monastics actually have to live by the vow of not eating after midday, for instance. Even that, only a small portion of Buddhist monastics are able to observe, not a lot. But having said that, what people can't do doesn't mean they're irrelevant. Definitely, the temperance has a lot of virtue in teaching our young and everyone how to moderate the intake of certain food, certain drinks, and not drink at all. So that basically that is a very high, very, very virtuous, very wholesome way of preaching and teaching our society, whether religiously or in civilly. It's definitely a relevant thing, because lots of first world people's eating and drinking behavior is ruining their lives. So therefore, that is still very, very valid virtue. And then third virtue is charity, that is generosity. And of course, the charity and generosity of Christians and good Christians and good Buddhists is some of the most moving lived through experiences of many people. We are all dependent on each other's generosity. So generosity is the most universal virtue that anyone would accept. Even you don't even have to be Christian or religious. Still, there are lots of people who are generous, who practice that. So all of these 7 virtues do not seem to be, to me, necessarily because they are adhering to Christian values or Buddhist teachings, but they seem to be very much expected moral behavior of the individuals. So those first three virtues, chastity, temperance, and charity, are all to do with how to control physical and material possession. So one should not develop attachment and clinging and miserliness, stinginess with the materialism, but rather practice generosity, sharing everything we have, giving those who need more than us, and not use ourselves with a lot of greed and a kind of a covetousness. So in Buddhism also, the idea of practicing charity as a remedy to miserliness, stinginess, covetousness is high on the Buddhist wholesome deeds that one must adhere to, charity. So even the charity, of course, even from the point of view of the Jesus Christ charity point of view, people talk about Jesus died for us to purify our sins. But then, of course, I don't know, if that's the case, then we shouldn't have any sins left because he died already. He died for us. So, but having said that, any kind of sacrifice that Jesus did, whether he sacrificed or he had to give in because he was already crucified, is that he's giving his body for the sake of, and I would say, inspiring his followers, is regarded as a very, what we may call, altruistic kind of giving of his body for the sake of others. Even in Buddhism, giving material, giving fearlessness, giving love, and giving one's body is considered to be greatest giving. Like Buddha spent 6 years in ascetic practice, we regard that as a great charity. And so likewise, whatever Jesus did and accepted the crucifixion and die under the cross is a great charity, a great gift. You know, people say Jesus died for us. And I'm sure there's no room to doubt about that, because he said that those who did hang him did not know what they were doing. So he had a lot of insight and wisdom, and instead he has a great mercy to those who actually did those things to him. I mean, there's a lot of virtue and a lot of morale in that when we have difficult people in our lives, we think we should retaliate and punish them. But if we are really heeding to Christian values or Buddhist teachings, we should tolerate those. We should bear the hardships and do the practices. But not everyone is gifted to practice that level of charity. Because when people want to do something, but as soon as they have it difficult physically, they will give up. They'll give up everything what they have. They would not do, because they could not bear any pain and hardships on the body. So giving one's body and its effort, and even dying for the sake of the followers by Jesus, for instance, is a very remarkable thing. It's like someone who rescued many people in the burning fire, and he himself burned into it, regarded as a great hero. So therefore, Jesus is a great hero. And even in Buddhism, we liken the people who are altruistic as a great hero. We call them bodhisattva. Bodhisattva means an enlightened warrior. There's no doubt that Jesus was a great warrior, selfless warrior, who died on the cross for the benefit of all sentient beings. Now, whether we want to believe that or not is one thing, but it's not a bad idea to promote that, because it suggests that we should all be patient in bearing hardships for the greater good of many. And then the fourth virtue is diligence. So instead of being slothful and lazy and procrastinating and very unproductive, diligence is a very, very important. So people who work for the charity, people who work for the Christian ministry, and they're working either as a ministry for the ministry, or they work for the charity of others. They work very hard around the corner. I remember when we were refugees in the early 1960s, in the remote areas in Nepal, there were lots of volunteer Red Cross people and Christian agencies going there. Whether they may have their main agenda is convert people or not is another thing, but they're actually going to help people who really need help. They bring food, medicine, clothes, with great charity, but the charity has to be, can only happen if there are diligent workers, diligent performers, diligent, I would say, volunteers. Like in our Buddhist organizations, all the people, right from the big top to the down, everyone is volunteers. Volunteers doing it out of diligently. But of course, people will share the workload, but doing diligently, selflessly. Lots of people are diligent with their own things, with their own food, clothes, shelter, mouth. Even dogs and jackals are very diligent. So we're not talking about that kind of diligence that you can only feed yourself. But diligence is working for the sake of others. And definitely the Christian morale or Christian virtue of working diligently, not being slothful, not being unproductive, and not trying to avoid and very, very unproductive, of course, is a cause of depression. Lots of people who are depressed are really slothful. They are not doing anything useful by themselves or for others. Even for themselves, they're not doing anything. They want it to be done for them by others all the time. They're not doing anything from their side. So there's a very great teaching there how to be diligent. Diligence is a great where there's a will, there's a way, they call it. So all of these, chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, these are all outer ethical behaviors that which we try to contribute to the society we live in. And the fifth is the patience, which is antidote to one's anger and wrathfulness and aggressiveness. Of course, we talk about peace. Peace is when we learn to pacify our own paranoia, our kind of restlessness, enmity, and ill will, and anger, and being and always having to retaliate verbally and physically. These things are cause of war between individuals as well as between communities, between tribes, and then between countries and internationally. So we need to practice peace. Peace is, they say, give peace a chance. But so giving peace a chance means we need to tolerate hardships and not to refuel the problem that's already created by others who are impatient. So if someone is impatient, then we need to see what must be driving them unconsciously to become like that. Do we want to join that? Do we want to repeat that? And see the futility of that, and then practice the patience. So patience is such a virtue. So all of these, chastity, temperance, charity, diligence, and patience, these are all outer physical behaviors. And then sixth one is gratitude. Instead of envy and instead of miserliness, one should be joyous, and we should rejoice good things. We should be grateful for the things we already have. We should rejoice other people's heart, status or accomplishment or diligence or harmony or accomplishment. When we do that, then there will be no jealousy between us. And you can see the Christian virtues are very much almost 100% in agreement with this. Whether there are certain things, whether you will go to hell if you don't believe in God, or there is no life after death, these are things that drive philosophy and views. But where it really boils down to is actual behavior of individuals who are very skillful and who are very skillful from causing any harm and therefore abstain themselves in the name of God or Dharma or Buddhism. if we have something to increase our carefulness to practice gratitude. So if you think of gratitude rather than the opposite, a lot of people who are depressed and angry and anxiety is because they have no gratitude. They instead have a lot of resentment. Instead of gratitude, they have lots of envy, lots of ill will, lots of resentment. So we need to, if people go to church to pray or people sit on the cushion to meditate, but the idea is try to have gratitude. Try to think of the things we have that are good, and also try to think of things that we don't have that is also good. Instead of envying and jealous of other people's what they have, we should rejoice the fact we don't have to have so much burden like others. They may seem very, very rich or well off, but who needs the richness of the worries and anxieties? So in this way, we can learn to develop gratitude. I'm sure the practice of gratitude can really help people to heal their difficulties with the interpersonal relationship with the family and others. If they think of the many things they need to be very grateful, if they can put a list of, I would say, a list of things they should be grateful to about someone or something, then it will definitely outweigh those things with which they are not happy or angry or unhappy about. So this you can see how if you can have a mind, if you are praying to Christ, if you're praying to God, or if you're meditating to cleanse your mind, where the Buddhists would say that latter is the more important, because praying to God doesn't help, because Buddhist does not even emphasize the existence of external God who listens to your prayer and do this for us. Most people theistically like to believe that, and even many Buddhists, cultural Buddhists, all pray to the Buddha as this to happen, that to happen, and express their gratitude thanks to the deceased or whatever. We can do all of that. There's nothing wrong with that. But most important thing is it's not so much the grace of the God that makes us to have gratitude too, but we have really nitty-gritty things that our parents and loved ones, the people in our life, do things for us, for each other. If we are becoming more grateful, more thankful, acknowledge them, compliment them, learn to do this, these things are real Christian values. The being kind to each other, being thankful to each other, acknowledge them, because they are not enlightened, so they need to be acknowledged, they need to be thanked. So that's why in a mundane world. And the last of the 7 virtues is humility. And now humility is a antithesis of the pride and arrogance. So these takes exactly all these 7 virtues of Christian teachings are completely in agreement with Buddhism. Only thing is these 7 virtues are largely ethical, physical behaviors of the person. It doesn't really talk about the intention so much. It doesn't really talk about the verbal behavior so much. There's not explicit in any of this. So of course, if they say you have to be patient, means you should be patient so that you mind your speech. How do you know if someone is patient? Because they don't say harsh words when some people verbally attack them. Not because they don't have any similar thing to say. They see the futility and harmfulness and unproductiveness of that. So therefore, one can only practice patience. One can do all of these seven virtues only if one has a control over one's mind. So therefore, none of these virtues are possible to practice if one loses one's mind to the afflictions. So that's why Buddhist teaching would emphasize the individual. Instead of trying to dish out some impressive virtues, outer virtues, one needs to check one's intention, why and how one can best do them. Otherwise, there's lots of hypocrisy in how to display one thing outwardly in public, one actually is not within. So the question of that's why even the practice of much talked about the chastity and celibacy is a great cause of hypocrisy, because it has no if the teaching is not there, that we should check our intention and motivation, then the outer behavior is totally contradictory to the intention of individuals. So you don't have to be Christian to do that. Even people who are very sincere Buddhists to do that, they try their best, but still their outer behavior and their intention do not match. They're always trying to display something outwardly. So that's why the whole overrated practice of celibacy is probably causing more harm to the church and its people, and therefore to the greater society, than it benefits. So that's why all religious tradition which promotes chastity and celibacy as a virtue definitely need to redefine these teachings and look and review it and interpret it properly, because otherwise that is the cause of some of the greatest hypocrisy of everyone, because it almost gives an impression as if biologically celibacy is possible. Biologically, celibacy is not possible, because we are all sexual sentient beings. We are product of sex, and result is also we have physical urges, hormonal things. So to think that you don't have craving for food, craving for drinks, craving for sexual urges is a completely over the board, so to speak. So that's why some of these old religious virtues have some relevance in the overall teaching, but how much it is actually helping the society. We can see all this abuse in a church and religious community we talk about. It's all coming from the inability to practice the first virtue, but yet everybody thinks it's a virtue. Is it really possible? Is it really a virtue to practice celibacy? If it is, animals are more virtuous than humans, because animals are mostly celibate 6 months of the year, or some of them maybe they have a mating season, a couple of weeks in the whole year, and the rest of the time they're all celibate. So what do you mean? Or if everybody who is celibate is virtue, then those animals are much more virtuous. So we probably has overrated this practice of celibacy, and for whatever reasons. But in modern world, in educated world, it's probably hygiene and the actual emotional hurt and harm that we try to avoid each other is probably more important than overrating the practice of celibacy. So and like the religious tradition, where there's no emphasis of great emphasis of celibacy, there's not a lot of sexual abuse, at least among the religious communities. But those religious traditional schools who emphasize as they are observing celibate vows, as if that is high, actually there's more problems and sexual abuse in that. So this is a great something that both Buddhist perspective on what you call celibacy. It's not just Buddhist perspective, but it really needs to be redefined. But remember, most of the religious schools, as conservative as they are, they refuse to change the text and the interpretation. And that's why the world, many people are walking away from the church and religious tradition, because the teachings of the gospel or teachings of the Dharma is not really livable in the 21st century. And those who teach us are only thinking it's irrelevant, but actually are themselves living a life of hypocrisy. So there's no difference between Buddhists and Christians. I'm not saying Christians are worse, Buddhists are better. There is just as many Buddhists who aren't able to live by those ideal things that the text says, but actually its relevance is pretty much in question. Because, as I said, if celibacy is the virtue, then no one can father a wonderful child, and so the world will basically disappear. So we have 8 billion people, and all these are result of procreation. So that's why it is important from the Buddhist perspective. While while Christians are divided among the Catholics and Protestants, because among the Protestants, they don't have celibacy necessary. And even among the monastics in Christianity, in the Catholics, they don't have they don't seem to have any practice of temperance. They're all drinking alcohol and wine all the time. So what's the point? So there is your chastity or lack thereof, even if you have a kind of pretended form of chastity, is not observed. Why? You're drinking alcohol. So that's why there's a lot of abuse in the church, or anybody doing harmful things to minors or to others, whoever they are, is because their mind is intoxicated by the lack of temperance. They're gluttonously drinking a lot of beer, a lot of alcohol, and as a result of that, they lost all the mindfulness of having to be celibate, having to be chaste, and whatnot. So, from the Buddhist point of view, the observing of the vow of temperance, or giving up alcohol, not taking any kind of the mind-altering substances that are drug, is a very important thing, because of course people are deluded enough. They don't have to take alcohol to cause harm to others, to abuse others sexually or otherwise. So therefore abstinence from alcohol and drug through the practice of temperance is a very important, relevant ethical value. So today, while celebrating the birthday of Jesus Christ, I'm sure most Christians are drinking as many bottles as possible. And unfortunately, as a result of that, there may be family brawls, a lot of road accident, all of this. Many of these are caused by the lack of temperance. So if people are celebrating Jesus Christ's birthday, it's instead of making a commercial or social, only as a social reason for the family to see each other, which is a very good occasion, but also it's very important to see some of the key teachings of the Jesus Christ, whether you are really practicing Christian or not, are still very important norms and teachings that we have, the world sorely needs. Turning our back entirely from church and its teachings is only decadent, materialistic way. No matter how much scientifically and technologically we progress, we still need to look and redefine some of these 7 virtues. Others are like the humility, the gratitude, patience, diligence, charity. The later five virtues are all, I would say, evergreen. They will be relevant all the time. They were valid in every community and tradition. But an overrated practice of chastity, or lack of it, but pretending as they are, and then not having any practice of temperance, is probably fails the practice of all the other virtues. So, having looked at that, we Buddhists should still honor our Christian brothers for their work, and that's why His Holiness Dalai Lama promotes that changing of people's cultural or religious tradition is not important. We can learn from each other, or try to augment your spiritual tradition by learning Buddhism or its meditation, its practices, as vice versa, because there will be among few of you, quite a few of your family members, except those who are born in Buddhist family or brought up a Buddhist family. You will see quite a lot of your near and dear are Christians, and we as a Buddhist need to show due respect and humility and harmony with the Christians, and talk the good things the Christians do. I think there are a lot more good things Christians do the Buddhists also could do. For instance, Buddhists have lots of ideas and philosophy, very important, but actual act of charity, actual act of building schools and hospitals where there are people dying and have no education. Christian work is very, very, this charity of the the charity of Christian work is very, very commendable. And there is a lot Buddhists can learn. Like the Buddhist charity is always people want to give to high lamas and monks and temple project, but they don't want to give to simple things like hospitals, schools, a road or orphanage or like that, you know. So there's a lot of lopsidedness in cultural reasons. Some people think giving charity to the religious reasons is only good, but not give charity of doing simple things on helping people on a who are not doing, who are really doing tough. Christians have done a lot, you know. So that's why there's a lot of how Buddhists can respect the teachings of the gospel, and then there may be, I'm sure, some teachings we can't agree. For instance, saying if those who don't follow God will go to hell. I mean, we will just put a deaf ear to that, and we don't have to fight over it. But there are many things we agree, and that's why it's we rather think about things that we share and we agree than those we do not agree. You know, when those people who don't agree, you will find within your own community over various issues, depending to what the actual issue or topic it is. So, therefore, Christmas is the day to remember the birth of Jesus Christ. In Tibetan called Jesus Yeshu Mashika. Everybody who hears it, even though they don't know anything, they always think it is a bodhisattva. They think he's a great Messiah or savior. They have that idea. And it is said that in the early 1700s, some Portuguese, monks came to Tibet, tried to convert Tibetans, and whenever the Portuguese monks tried to tell Tibetans about Jesus Christ, and they never reject. They say, yes, thank you very much. Yes, we call him Padmasambhava. So they never said, please go away, we don't want to believe. They say, yes, that's very good. We call him Padmasambhava, call it. So there's a very important message of tolerance and acceptance in this being a good Christian. Being a good Christian should be like that. Good Christians are who practice these 7 virtues, and if anyone who practice these are actually living the way of peace and kindness, tolerance, and compassion. Who cares whether or how the world started, whether the God made or whether whatever? Who actually wants to know? If somebody wants to spend time explaining that to you, it comes at the door, then you should listen to them for a while and give them some sense of purpose, because if that's what they want to say to us, we don't have to agree them, but nevertheless we don't have to turn a sour face toward them, because they still believe in their church work. A lot of people give so much of the energy and time and the charity to the church in its work. They believe in that, and lots of people who have a good leaning onto church and its teachings. Usually, these people actually are a lot more thoughtful and avoid aggression and violence in society. But of course, there are always religious fanatics who believe our way is the only way, and others who follow that is not. So, of course, that kind of dualistic, divisive kind of teaching is not useful. So, in this 21st century, particularly those of us who live in Judeo-Christian community, basically, it is important to honor majority people's way and norms and beliefs. How much they practice as a Christians or not is another thing. But being able to promote that, even not thinking that we are Buddhists, we don't honor Christians, or we don't honor Jesus Christ. Of course, if we live in some place where there's nothing Christian happening, of course we don't need to. But where there are others, it's good to show courtesy and respect and humility and gratitude to the good work that Christians do. Christians do a lot of good works, you know. But if there are a lot of harm that is caused in the name of religion, and then that is a fault of individuals, and so that those individuals don't represent Christians or Buddhists. They just have their own karma on their dragging down themselves, and we should not lump them as a Buddhist doing this or Christians doing this. These are basically people who are not able to live by the virtue of the teachings of the gospel or whatever the case might be. So Buddhists have really good reason to rejoice Jesus Christ in order to enable us to think Jesus has Buddha nature. All sentient beings has a Buddha nature. So Jesus too may have predisposed himself to benefit. Otherwise, why would have more than 40% of the world population following Christianity? Buddhists, there's no more than 7%. No more than 7% in the past, no more than 7% even today, you know. While lots of people may philosophically like Buddhism, learn Buddhism, but religious follower of Buddhism is no more than 7%. Even by the most recent census shows that even so, some countries maybe there are 99% all Buddhists, like Thailand or somewhere, but still, in comparison, the rest of the world is not. The rest of the world has 40% or more who are Christians, and Buddhists are still minority 7. And so it's not a question of who with the more number, but that means that Jesus Christ has a strong range of good morale, good Christian values, inspired these many people, these many countries, this many centuries. So there must be something incredible virtue in the Jesus Christ, the Son of the God, who we call it manifestation of the Bodhisattvas. And so when you hear all the mystical stories of the Jesus or the life of the Buddha or Bodhisattva, they're very, very similar. There are a lot of stories about supernatural power and all of that. But most important thing is that how much of we call it Buddha activities, we can call this as how much the Christ activities, Christ consciousness, and its virtues and its Christian values are still kept and maintained, and how certain people among the Christians who actually live by the Christian teachings are more inclusive, accepting, tolerant of others. But then there is every room for certain exceptions. Some who are very, very good Christians are very, very righteous about their way is the only way, and others are wrong. But that doesn't reflect the actual view of the overall Christian people. So with this in mind, today as well as other days, when we are sharing this beautiful earth with fellow other people like Christians, we need to be very, very generous and courteous to show our respect. So with this, I would like to conclude here. If you have any questions or comments, she says, Priangala, is it? I have some amazing Sri Lankan Catholic nuns whom I'm very close to. Even though I'm a Buddhist, I support the good deeds they do by helping yeah, that's right. Indeed, yeah. So we have very good reason to see the good that other people do. Yes. When His Holiness Dalai Lama says, when he meets some of the very, very, very devout Christian monks and nuns or Jesuit priests or Benedictine monks and nuns and some of the Muslims and Hindu yogis, he is very inspired. The type of dedication, like the type of asceticism Indian yogis practice is no comparison with the Buddhist monks in very colorful robes. They spend more time to get the robe right, and the Hindu yogis hardly want to put on anything because it's not an issue. They barely wanted to just just live under the veranda every night. They have made a vow not to live on anything, and they actually live by it. Whereas the Buddhist monastics have become more like royalties. They live in very nice, big kind of a luxurious temples and opulence, furnitures, and so many people waiting on them and doing this. So there's a lot of wonderful things, humility and simplicity and dedication and those things you will see from other practitioners of other religious traditions. So in this world, we need to rejoice and show respect to each other, not cause any division for whatsoever. So I remember that when we were living in the refugee camp, every time the small twin otter plane comes with the Red Cross mark, we are happy because it's coming to deliver food to us in our refugee camp in remote Nepal. These are all Red Cross. Red Cross is Christian. Red Cross is inspired by Christian work of the cross on which Christ died. So these are all inspired by the charity, Christian charity, which has helped millions of actually, I would say, millions of refugees around the world are always helped by Red Cross. And Red Cross is Christian inspired. And so therefore a lot of the Christian values and ethics are completely in agreement and admirably there, much probably more stricter than some of the other religious tradition interpretation would. So with this, we will conclude here, everyone. Thank you very much. We had a bit of problem with the transmission because of the power outage, but that's all we can do. Thank you very much. I'll do the dedication of merits, so we'll be able to upload this on YouTube later anyway, even though we could not stream it today due to the power outage. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a very safe and sound and sane, safe, sound, and sane holiday period seasons greetings to you all. Thank you, everybody, for your time, giving your Christmas lunch up and listening to me instead. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.